Unpack all of this with my guest, forensic psychiatrist and body language expert, Dr. Carole Lieberman in Los Angeles. Dr. Lieberman, so much to talk about here. Let's start with the suicide watch that Kelly was placed on after he was sentenced. His attorneys say he was showing no signs of hopelessness, that he was not in any way wanting to harm himself, and that he was worried they would place him on suicide watch. Can you talk about what the psychological impact can be of placing an inmate on suicide watch, and if you know what the evaluation process is when jails make that decision?
Well, the evaluation process is supposed to be, a very intensive examination, and more than one, preferably with the psychiatrist, to go through, again, a very lengthy kind of question and conversation. We're talking about hours. And in reality, though, a lot of times that doesn't happen. It's really a very perfunctory kind of, so are you thinking of killing yourself? I mean, instead of going through really a lot more than that, because they might say no, but they might actually have intentions to kill themselves. So you have to be very subtle about how you conduct this examination. I think some jails have gotten a little skittish in terms of being more safe than sorry, because of some high-profile suicides, or, well, alleged suicides that there have been. And, you can imagine thinking that with R. Kelly, the idea for him to think about 30 years, I mean, presumably they're going to appeal, but still, the thinking of 30 years, he that idea, you can imagine how he would think of committing suicide, facing that prospect.
And, that's the argument from these defense attorneys, is that they jumped to the conclusion of him needing to be on suicide watch. They even said that he was worried it would happen because it happened back when the verdict came down in September, and he told his attorneys he didn't want to go to suicide watch. They told him to email them once he got back to his cell, once he was able to communicate, and they never got the email, so that's when they learned he likely was on suicide watch. Can you talk a little bit about what this looks like for an inmate who is placed in this? Because we heard this during the case of Ghislaine Maxwell, who was also placed on suicide watch right before her sentencing, and they talk about the irreparable emotional distress that this can cause on an inmate. That's the subject of this lawsuit, where they are going to be claiming damages.
Oh, well, yes, suicide watch or isolation, as well as having people check on you every 15 minutes or so. It is the reason why it's so hard in particular is because you are left alone with all your thoughts, all your demons. And that, whether it's called suicide watch or just in isolation, that in itself can be torture for someone who has a lot of demons. For example, his thinking, he was used to living such a high life, and to think about how this is not going to be happening again for 30 years. Hours, a whole day. Usually they get 1 hour when they can come out somewhere. But that is just torture for someone like that.
This apparently was several days. We will see what happens with this lawsuit, because the government is saying it's moot now. He's no longer on that suicide watch after several days of being there. I want to turn our conversation to the second prong of our coverage, the possibility that he is now engaged. And I do want to read a statement that we just got this morning from the Savage family's attorney, Gerald Griggs, asking him whether or not they had heard about her being engaged. He said this is new information to her family about any alleged engagement, and it is telling that Joycelyn didn't appear at the sentencing but submitted a typed and move on with the familial relationships separate and apart from Robert Sylvester Kelly. Dr. Lieberman, this is a situation where these parents say that she's been brainwashed. She's known him since she was about 17, 18 years old, and they want her to come back to them. But you see in this letter that she says she's in love with him and now engaged to him. Well,
he's been a Svengali towards her and towards lots of other women. And it is really sad. And the parents have been trying to get her back from the beginning. But, I think she was hoping that he was going to create a music career for her. He might still be telling her that, just stick with me. But she's been on television talking about how dedicated she is to him and how wonderful he is and all of that. And she's sticking with it. It's interesting because that has become her identity. Whether she was formally engaged or just as his girlfriend, she has been, telling the media and so on for years that she was with him. So that's kind of become, it's almost like, well, if I give this up, who am I?
It certainly has been ongoing. You mentioned the interviews, the iconic Gayle King interview with R. Kelly. Joycelyn Savage was there in the room supporting him, and she is still supporting him if this letter, as her parents say, it's typed. But if it is, in fact, her writing, then it shows that her support is still there. Dr. Lieberman, thank you so much for your insight on all of this. We are going to continue to follow the biggest legal cases across the country coming.